Welcome back, everybody, to me complaining about the Wheel of Time for the almost last time. This is definitely the end of these reading vlog kind of things, and while I'll probably do at least one wrap-up video on like where I'm with the whole series and stuff, one may take until next week, I guess. So yeah, let's talk about the rest. The final battle, the last battle, and what came afterwards. Let's do this, shall we? Right. Cheers. All right. So, we left off with, like, that chapter, The Last Battle, which I already said is a long-ass chapter that doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, doesn't go anywhere, but like a long-ass chapter that could have been like 1 or 2 chapters because it jumps around a lot. And as I said, the actual battle stuff is done well. The jumping around between perspectives, really cool. The fact that I get bored after a while is definitely not Robert Jordan's or Brandon Sanderson's fault here. It's just that I'm not a huge fan of really long, large-scale battles. It's not my kind of, my kind of thing. But it's done much better than most of the battle stuff in A Memory of Light before, right? The parts when they are like 4 different groups. So, let's look at what comes afterwards, and then pick out some of the problems that I have with the rest of it, because I don't think the ending is that good. And I feel most of that is rooted in, like, prior faults of the series. It's not a problem of this novel per se. It's, it has to deal with all the stuff, all the groundwork that was laid before, and there's all the problems, most of them. Anyway, all right, so, let's look at what happens. So Rand does his weird thing where he's somewhere outside the pattern, and having this competition on, like, world-building competition with the Dark One. And, I don't know. I like the idea of having, like, 2 different people trying to come up with, like, possibilities on how the world would work, and then, could be, and, that's a really clever idea. I heartily approve of that. I mean, yeah, it's great. Now, the individual versions, the Dark One, like, everything's dark, everyone's evil, Nynaeve's ruling the world kind of thing, yeah, I don't know. It's a bit cheesy, but I can live with that. Then Rand with the like, full-on, like, everyone's remembering everything nice and cool, whatever, version, I guess, yeah, whatever, It's all about, like, figuring out these things and how the world could be, and I like that. Now, the problem with it is obviously the overall theology of the Wheel of Time. And I'll definitely come back to that when I do my full-on wrap-up. But the problem here is that suddenly the Dark One is a person. It's personified, right? We don't know anything about the creator. Yes, he's called he at some point, but the creator does not interact with the Wheel of Time at all. It's, your Deus Ociosus, your, like, God who creates the world and then leaves it alone to do whatever it wants to do. If you want to read some deist literature from the 17th century, you'll learn a lot about all of that. Spoiler alert, not all deists are about that, God abandoning creation, or not abandoning, but, like, staying out of creation. There's, like, a lot of debate on that, but we're not talking about it here, because this is not, like, the deism channel. Yeah. But on the other hand, the Dark One exists and exerts power on the world, on the weave, on the Wheel of Time. And up to this point, we have no real idea why the Dark One exists, how the Dark One exists, and what the Dark One really wants. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I guess the Dark One's evil. And that's, like, one sentence that I'm, like, almost 99% sure was added by Brandon Sanderson to this chapter, even though, and that's, like, when Rand's talking to the Dark One, is like he or it, because really the Dark One does not have a gender. And I just can't see Robert Jordan using the word gender anywhere. It just feels out of place after we've like talked about it all the time. So yeah, we have that weird situation where people are praying to a non-existing, not non-existent, but like inactive creator, actually praying for like stuff, salvation, which all of these things kind of require someone to give salvation, someone to save you. Doesn't work without it, right? And at the same time, we have a very active, almost personal force called the Dark One. Why the Dark One exists, we don't know. Is it just because we're living in like a polarized universe, in a dualist universe where there will always be two opposing forces? So, you know, you go to your Zoroastrian style of belief, your Manichaeism, your Cathar heresy, that kind of thing. Or are we talking about like the creator and a fallen one in a more Christian model, where you have an adversary that opposed God for whatever reason, or your, Melkor to Iluvatar in Tolkien speak, if you want to use that one, right? And that's a possibility, but we don't know because we never learn anything about like why there is a Dark One with his own power, his own essence, or its own essence, the true power that they can grant. It just doesn't really add up when you talk about cosmology there, and I feel that's part of the problem there, because you have that option of like no morality, no morals. That's what the Dark One wants. So are morals essential, and which kind of morals are essential? Is there are there objective moral rules out there? Is that what Robert Jordan is trying to tell us, that evil is a world without a fixed form of morality? Is that the lesson there, which is the second world that the Dark One creates when Rand is like walking through Camelin and the people are just like killing people because might is right and all of that? And possibly, we don't know. And yeah, it turns out at the end the world is just the world that it is now, and that's that. Like, people are there living their best lives, sort of, and the Dark One is confined once again with all these powers uniting and so forth. And yeah, I like the idea that yes, you can't banish evil from the world. The problem with it is obviously the corollary there that you have to accept evil and you can't even dream of a perfect world. I don't think that's a good idea, because that's a very more like conservative view of the world, where it's like, yeah, you know what? There is evil in the world. Look after yourself, forget the rest. It's like, no, you should always look after the big picture and try to do the right thing and dream of a perfect world. Will we personally achieve a perfect world in our lifetime? Of course not. But that shouldn't stop us from dreaming and from trying to make, because that's how you make the world better, not by just looking after yourself and making yourself better, but by trying to make the world better all the time. It's an important aspect, personally, to me, at least. And what else about it? Like, I mean, I do kind of enjoy that bit, but it gets more like boring afterwards, and that's like sort of the aftermath that I want to talk about for a bit here. That's the end of Slayer and the end of what's his name, Mashadar, and all of that stuff. It just kind of felt like a bit of an afterthought. It was like thought of like we have had the final battle. Egwene has done her heroic death. And we'll talk about that in a second. All of that stuff sorted out, and suddenly someone remembers, like, oh wait, Padan Fane's around somewhere. We should probably do something about that. Oh, and also Slayer, Luke Eson, is still around somewhere. We should probably do something about that. And then we have that chapter when like Perrin is running around through the Wolf Dream again, killing Slayer for good this time round, and Matt is killing Padan Fane with the Golden Dagger from Shadar Logoth, and thus ending that one. Like, yeah, I don't know. Could have been cool, but it feels a bit more like an afterthought at that point, and I'm not completely happy with that. It could have been worse, definitely worse. But yeah, there we are. Then there's a lot of mopping up there. Let's talk about deaths in general here. So other people that die. Egwene dies, and that's important. Gawain dies, of course. What's their name? Swan Sanche and Gareth Bryn both die. And it's like, okay, I guess we needed to get rid of those. But it's like, yeah, Swan just gets killed by a blast somewhere. And I know there's that connection with Min doing her, like, Min thing and having that viewing and Swan interpreting it the wrong way. But, yeah, at that point, I just didn't care. It's like, all right, so Swan comes over to Min. Min's like, oh no, you're gonna die. The place is attacked, Swan dead. All right, I guess that's that. And on the other hand, then we find out that Gareth just went mad and died as well. And so, okay, whatever. It's a bit of a shame that you don't see, like, give them like a more like a stronger ending or whatever, because they felt like important characters. But I guess at the end of the day, there's only those like 3 or 4 really important characters, and that's just how we have to live with it. And now let's talk about Egwene, and let's talk about sacrifice here. So a lot of the final battle, the last battle, and all of that stuff is very much about sacrifice. And I have issues with that. A lot of issues, actually. So here's the problem, right? A lot of fantasy is very much about people sacrificing themselves for a greater good or whatever. And it has been a part of like sacrifice is a narrative that we've dealt with for ages and ages and ages, and I think there's something toxic in that, because like sacrifice can become very much like a self-serving thing, and up to a point, Robert Jordan seems to be aware of that, right? Gawain going there and killing him, trying to kill Demondred and being slaughtered. And Gawain doing like using those weird rings of the blood knives where we know that they will kill him is exactly that. He's doing it, but is it right what he's doing? Should he have done that? He decides that he can take that part and kill himself to save others. And that's a very dangerous narrative, because no one should ever do that. I know it's kind of tough to talk about that kind of stuff while we have like wars on, but we always have wars on, and wars are where people sacrifice themselves for all kinds of ideas. And I've never been in a situation where I had to do that, so I'm obviously talking from like the wrong perspective here. But it feels kind of weird to have that here. And then we have Egwene at the end, suddenly out of nowhere inventing like anti-balefire, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. It just happens to be there. We have seen that before when Egwene kind of heals, or part of the weave falling apart with whatever. And I'm like, this magic system. I need to use the word magic system here because it pretends to have a system, right? You have those 5 elements, you weave them into kinds of things. And I like the term of weaving. I can live. Like, all of that is pretty neat, but it doesn't have, like, anything around it. It's like, so it's something that you can learn, but sometimes out of nowhere you can just, like, come up with something really powerful and amazing, like stopping balefire, which by definition should be, outside of that because it destroys the fabric of reality. And Egwene just suddenly happens to know this because she needs to know it right now to defeat Mazrim Taim, and then die while doing that in a most glorious way. And I have an issue with glory there. And I don't know, a lot of this felt a bit like shallow to me. It was too overdone. It was too cartoonish, too cinematic almost. It's like, and that's a personal taste thing. I can totally see people reading this and saying, wow, what a noble sacrifice. What an amazing scene. Everything's covered in crystals now. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. I can see that. It just doesn't work for me. I'm not a huge fan of it, but there we are, and we have a lot of that. But let's look at other things that bothered me with the ending. Unnecessary bits. So Oliver takes the horn. Matt is no longer the hornblower. We know that because he died. Turns out he died twice, I guess. And I'm not sure why that was necessary to put in there. So we have the whole, like, Rand attacks Caemlyn at the end of, I think, Fires of Heaven? Probably Fires of Heaven. Or Shadow Reborn? I'm not quite sure. I think it's at the end of Fires of Heaven. But I'm, as I said, not 100% sure here. when Rand goes to Camelin and uses Balefire, and suddenly both Aviendha and Mat are are still alive and not dead. And apparently that's the one that counts to, disconnect Mat from the Horn. But he also was hung before, and I'm like, why add the double one in there? It's could have just as well kept it simpler and used the one when he was hung on the tree, which is, I think, feels more interesting, because while Rand, saved his life in both cases, it felt more like Mat got himself into that situation with the tree and all. So I don't know. It's just like probably a question of personal taste here, but I feel it was an unnecessary complication there that wasn't really needed there. So, yeah, I don't know. As I said, it felt unnecessarily complicated. What else was there? There's all these small bits and pieces that I don't really like about the ending. The point with Rand switching bodies with Moradin and coming alive afterwards was like, yeah, sure, why not? I personally object to the fact that Rand is still alive. I don't like that. I would have liked the whole thing to be more consistent, have Rand just actually die. Which is interesting, because I just complained about sacrifice being meaningless before. But it felt more like, why is he getting away with it, right? If heroes do dumb things and then survive, that's not a good thing for me. It's like, I would have loved him to actually die and people just remember him. But the ending in general is probably pretty dissatisfying, because we don't know whether Robert Jordan planned to write anything beyond that. I don't know, at least for the further future, right? Rand living happily ever after with his dad and his 3 wives and all of that stuff. We don't know if that exists, so it's very open-ended in that regard. We don't know how the world will continue. And in general, I don't mind that. It's with books. Books come to an end and then things happen afterwards. And you can say they lived happily ever after, or you can leave all kinds of things unresolved. Like Malazan, Book of the Fallen, leaves a ton of things unresolved. It's just that with Wheel of Time, it felt weird, because a lot of the final decisions they made to get everyone on board for the final battle were not really good ones, right? We have the whole Damani slavery issue with the Shan-Chan. I'm like, I don't know. Apparently that's all good now, because Rand's gone and does his own thing, and we'll just have to live with a world where slavery is still a big thing. Could there have been stories about the end of slavery in Shan-Chan? Possibly. But we don't get them. So that's just bits and pieces that we have, and leave the whole thing a bit weird to me. Let's talk about more aspects here. Poetic Justice or Karma is one of those things that I really don't like at all. But, well, whatever. And seeing these different versions, right, where Graendal gets backfired, whatever her compulsion is now compulsed herself, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And then Moghedien, who is, in my view, the best of the Forsaken, really, becomes a Damani, because of course she does, and because we need more women to be enslaved there, just like Elida. And I'm like, really? Is that how you explain justice? You were bad, now you're a slave, have fun. Just, it's a bit lame to have that sort of justice, especially since everyone gets what they deserve at the end. Except on the larger, greater picture, right? It's everyone gets what they deserve. Even Perrin keeps Fail, which is also okay, I guess he deserved it, but not everyone, deserves things to be nice, but I don't know. It just really didn't sit that well with me in that regard. There's more weird inconsistencies. So how does compulsion work? Because I'm not quite sure. So Graendal fucked around through compulsion or whatever with Rotal Ituralda's brain. We know that. And now he's supposed to be king of the king of of Aradoman. I'm like, isn't that kind of dangerous if his mind has been fucked around with? Also, what happened to Lord Ogilmar? We don't know. He's just like off the map after a book, after a while ago. He got like arrested, and that's that. Gareth Bryn is dead. So's Davram Bashir. I guess that's kind of nice. So yeah, I feel a lot of that just felt a bit random. It's like we just drop names and then they're gone. And for other people that we really didn't care about that much, we suddenly get like an ending with, Anura saving Gallard for Berylane, so Berylane can finally actually be in love. And I don't know, it just left me cold in a lot of ways where I'm like, I've slogged through 14 books, and at the end of the day, yeah, a bunch of people die, a bunch of people survive. It just feels kind of random. And in some, where we have like more polarizing characters, they get like the cheapest and most simplistic version of poetic justice or karma hitting them in the face, and then we're done. And Rand has Olivia help him to die. Remember how that was like a really big fuss about that, and Min was pissed off and everything. Turns out what she really does is get him a set of clothes and some stolen money and a stolen horse. Great job right there. And it would have been easy to either just drop that whole plotline with Olivia. It feels like maybe Robert Jordan had something planned and we don't know about it, but it feels like, why even include that character? Why make that character anything like with that whole thing? And all she does at the end is, provide new clothes. And Rand could have done that part by himself. No problem at all. But he, which feels weird. Like, if you had like Olivia helping Rand with that soul switch with, what's his name? Moradin. That would have been cool. Why not? But, there's all this potential. We don't use it. Instead, it's that cheap and simple. I'm like, all right. Let's look at like a final thing that I guess I've already brushed up on like before. And that's the problem with the background, the impact. And I'm just saying it didn't really work. We have all these Forsaken that have all these supposedly intricate intrigues and backstories where they really hate each other for all kinds of personal reasons and all of that stuff. But we don't know about it. And that takes away a lot of impact. Apparently, Luz Theron and the guy who becomes Moradin, who has like a long-ass name that we learned at some point, is like, why do we need even more names? Whatever. Right? Those two were best friends at some point, which would add some sort of, tension there, some moral weight to that, like, rivalry, best friends becoming deadly rivals, having to fight each other again and again. There's something in there, and you can see that kind of stuff with Ferdia and Cuchulainn in Irish mythology, and there's a lot of like these kind of things all over the place in mythology and history. But we don't know about that. It's just that Rand calls him my old friend at some point. I'm like, all right, okay. And if we'd had like one or two flashback scenes at some point, once, Luz Theron's memory has been incorporated with Rand and whatnot, right? About like the good old times when when Luz Theron was still friends with Moradin / Ishamael / whatever his name is, right? That would have added drama. That would have added like, I would have cared. At this point, Moradin is just like an insane smartass, and I'm like, okay, I guess. Kill the bastard. You know what I mean? The weight behind those decisions, the tragedy of having all these super powerful people all the way back in the Age of Legend, making some crucial mistakes, and everyone ending up on opposite sides of this like huge divide and fighting and fighting and fighting and all of that. All of that gets just like shrugged aside because all we have from that time is that one scene where Rand is living the memories of that one Aiel. And that's all of it. And why is Demon Dread hating Rand so much and has this eternal competition with him? What's the story there? All of these things are missing, which makes Demon Dread's like insanity, like trying to get Lews Therin to duel him, feel so out of nowhere, because we haven't seen Demon Dread around before. We know he's always angry and he really hates Lews Therin, but so do the others, right? The only one where we have a bit more about that is, at the end of the day, Lanfear, Sindane, whatever her real name is, right? She maybe was in love with Lews Therin. We don't know. I mean, yeah, it gets implied that she never was, because all she wanted was power and stuff. But maybe there was more. We don't know. But it feels like she has a reason to hate Lews Therin. And maybe Demon Dread hates Lews Therin because Lews Therin got Ilyena, who seems to be, the pre-incarnation of Elaine, name-wise at least. Maybe it's about Ilyena with Demon Dread. But it could have been, a bit more explicit or whatever, and it would have helped. And then we have people like Samael. What's Samael's story? Why would I even care about the Forsaken? Because we don't have anything. They're evil. That's all we know. With Mazrim Taim, it's kind of more obvious because we've seen him around. It would have been cool to have a bit more about that, but yeah, it's more about him like, I could have been the Dragon Reborn, and now I'm pissed, but I still want to be my own guy, and yeah, there's something there with that one. But with the rest, it's like, what's Moghedin's story? Why is Moghedin a Forsaken? We don't get that. We get, like, repetitions of what they are, like Greendal is vain, maybe, or really likes perfection. And Moghedin is a coward, apparently, and plans things out. And all of we know their, like, descriptions of, like, who they are now, and, like, why they are. We never learned that. And that's, like, a general problem that we have with almost every character in this series. We get it told again and again and again who they are, but we never learn why they are, or, like, why they are like that, or how they became that person. And that's what adds depth to a character, right? It's like that kind of build up that shows you, because characters are not static. We as people change over time. You can call it growth, but there are changes, and we are not, none of us is who we are just because the pattern or whatever says, we need an arrogant bastard who really hates Wheel of Time. Bam, and then here I am, right? That's not how it works. I ended up in that situation for all kinds of reasons. And a lot of more contemporary fantasy does look into that. It's like, how do people become who they are now, right? That's all you get in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, for example. Even, with Joe Abercrombie, with the First Law trilogy, even with that one, there's a lot of explanations of, like, why people are the way they are. With with the Wheel of Time, we don't have that, with, like, few exceptions. Oliver, yes, Oliver is, like, the glowing exception there. There's a few hints here and there with some of the other characters, but most of the time it's like, why is Egwene the person she is? It's like, she has to be the Armerlin, so she is. There's zero, like, reasons behind how she becomes the person she becomes. Same with most of the others. Nynaeve, there's a bit more, but that's something that we see a lot with the books, and that's, I guess, why the ending feels so dissatisfying for me. Is like, we have watched these characters on their long journey to somewhere, and, like, very few have ever changed for any reason, and that makes all the things that happen to them at the end feel so hollow, because it's like, whatever. Not really cool. There's obviously more to be mad about. What else? I guess all the Trollocs just get killed and then everyone's happy. Maybe, I don't know. Loyal writes a book. Maybe. And Cadsuane becomes new Armerlin, and I'm okay. Even the, like, thing with Logain feels a bit hollow. Like, I mean, there's at least something there, like him hating the people that hate him for being who he is and whatnot, and then he saves a child, and everyone's like, wow, awesome, you're good now. And he's like, oh, wow, people like me for the things I can do. Fantastic. But at that point, I just didn't care anymore. And I feel that's like the overall issue. Also, that Rand is now able to manipulate the power itself, the fabric of the reality itself. It's like he really is Jesus at this point, isn't he? Right? He has to die, and now he's born again, and he can do all kinds of things with the patterns. Like, and if he can just light his pipe by just not by thinking about it, he could. He didn't even need Olivia for that. For getting in close. It's that old problem that our main characters, our main three male characters, can do whatever they want. They don't need help from anyone for anything. Even if it's claimed that they need help, they really didn't. It's just like a pretense, because there's that like whole male power fantasy thing there. And well, the female characters are, just there to worship them most of the time and stand in their shadow and get rescued whenever someone needs them to be rescued. And isn't it interesting that the only one that really suffers out of Rand's three girls is Avienda? Min doesn't suffer. Elaine doesn't really suffer. I mean, she's close to it, and then Brigida saves her, which is neat. But it's Avienda who loses toes and will probably never be able to walk properly and all of that. It's like, of course it's the non-white character who does that. And once again, I'm not saying this is like on purpose. I'm just saying that's the way people think in some regard. And that's like the subconscious sort of like racism there that annoys me. Once again, I'm not gonna go all mad on you and scream and yell and whatnot, because I'm just exhausted at this point. Is there anything more? Yeah, I mean, overall, I like Oliver's story the most. That's like the only really interesting character in the entire series. Plus his happy end when like Jane Farstrider Noel is now a hero of the Horn. That's really cool. That ending, nice. I like that one. That was fun. That was well done, and it worked. I'm pissed that Bella had to die. That poor horse doing all the job for like 2 years and all of that stuff, and then it just gets shot down for no reason. I'm like, okay. Isn't that weird that after all the two deaths in this series that really hit me the most are the deaths of Hopper and Bella? Doesn't that really say something about the series, or about me, or I guess about both? But man, I don't know. Really a shame that we spend so much time with unnecessary things, and then have like all these big things, like not short big, like all these like things in the past and like the early books that could have been put in there and helped really make this a much more impactful story. So at the end, all I got is a huge lot of fireworks with the final battle. Some repetition, and then an ending that didn't really satisfy me. The world is just the same as it was before. Some people are just evil because evil is part of humanity. I can kind of live with that, I guess. Although with like the Dark One, I don't know. The Dark One really doesn't make any sense. I guess we'll just have to live with that. We also see our, what's her name, Nakomi again for a second. I mean, yeah, divine intervention, I guess. Then Rand rides off into the south to be his own man for once, looking very differently. And his three wives, no, like three girls, no, because they're still bonded to him. Which I guess means that if you shift your personality, those kind of things remain with you, so it's not a physical thing. Really, the metaphysics just don't work in these books. I just have to live with that. So yeah, everyone's happy except me. Although I'm happy now because I'm free and I'm going to read The Tangled Lands by Paolo Bacigalupi and Tobias Espokal tonight, and talk about that one in the next couple of days. I'm not sure if there will be like a lot of videos next week though, because I'll be traveling to the Courts of Chaos Festival in wonderful Brittany, France. If you're there, come by. Let's have a beer. Let's talk. Would be cool. And that reminds me, maybe it's time for me to actually go and reread the Chronicles of Amber. Let me know what you think about that. I hope you had more fun with Wheel of Time than I did. I'm glad it's over. And see you soon. Cheers.